What's going on with the media and why are right-wing billionaires buying up so many media properties? In today's show, Matt Gertz, a senior fellow at Media Matters for America, joins to talk about the right-wing takeover of CBS News, the right-wing takeover of TikTok, the potential takeover of CNN, and why newspapers, small network affiliates, TV stations, and social media companies are all being pushed in a right-wing direction and what it means for America. If you enjoyed the podcast, please give us a like, subscribe, comment. All of that is welcome. And if you really enjoy the podcast, please become a member of the Center for New Liberalism. You can do that at cnliberalism.org/become a member. That's the best way to support our work. And thank you to all our current members. Thanks one more time for listening and enjoy the episode. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the New Liberal Podcast, part of the Center for New Liberalism. I'm your host, Jeremiah Johnson, and joining me today is Matt Gertz. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me back.
Always glad to have you back. It's always odd when I have you on the show. You've come on a couple times now, and every time it's like, it's never anything happy that we're talking about. I don't think you have a very bright and optimistic beat.
You know, I have to tell you, that is the case for basically all of the interviews I do with anyone. It's never for good news, unfortunately.
Which is funny because you're such a nice guy. You're such a nice, upbeat guy in person. But
I try. I'm very good at compartmentalizing. But when people want to talk to me, especially my favorite is when foreign journalists want to talk to me, like from Germany or the UK or whatever. They want to find out like what the hell is going on in American politics. It's never because something good is going on.
So what is going on with the presidencies in America? Is this something you intended? Was this on purpose?
I mean, not me personally, but
it is on purpose for some people. And I think that's a nice segue into what we're talking about today, which is the control of the media that the Republican world writ large, not just the Republican Party, not just Donald Trump personally, but the conservative sphere of media seems to be growing. Our last episode was actually with someone from Fire, with Rachel McLaughlin at Fire. I'm sorry, Sarah McLaughlin. I should remember because it's basically the same as the singer. But we talked about free speech, and we talked about how there are threats to free speech in the very obvious ways of Pam Bondi saying she's going to prosecute hate speech, which is not a real legal thing you can do, with, people getting canceled for Charlie Kirk takes and for, the Jimmy Kimmel stuff. And all of that is correct to worry about. But there's something else that I think we need to worry about that's a little slower, but maybe a little bit more insidious. And that is control of our media sphere by people who are allied with Donald Trump. So I'll kick things to you, and maybe you have a couple examples in mind, but when you think about this problem, I know you've written about it a little bit. What are some of the big examples that jump out to you where the media landscape and the ownership of the media landscape seems very different than it was 10 or 15 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think pulling back, there are three different phenomena that are happening right now. One is that the business environment for the media remains quite bad. Between cord cutting and its impact on broadcast and cable news, the continued sort of dissolution of ad markets for print and digital media, there just aren't a lot of options for making revenue. And because of that, media companies are kind of on the back foot no matter what. And that leaves them open for both consolidation and for being manipulated in various ways.
This is not an especially expensive thing to do, especially to like swoop in and buy like a newspaper, for instance. They're not going at a premium like they did in the 1990s.
Yes, that's right. And, we had several waves of consolidation of those local newspapers, followed by, huge sets of layoffs, followed by the increased losses of circulation because no one really wants to buy a newspaper if it doesn't have much in the way of reporting in it. So that's, I think, the first problem. The second problem is that we have an authoritarian president who is willing and able to use various regulatory carrots and sticks to intimidate and manipulate the corporate owners of various media outlets. And the third thing that we see happening is, frankly, a movement of uh, billionaires toward the right. Some of these media moguls, people like Jeff Bezos or Patrick Soon-Shiong, who own respectively the Washington Post and the LA Times, when they bought those papers, no one said, "Oh, here comes this right-wing billionaire taking it over. Now it's going to be a much more right-wing outlet." But over the years, and in particular over the last year, and with Trump's return to office, they both have taken on a much more right-wing posture in their own public
Hmm.
statements. And so this,
I remember when Bezos took over the Washington Post. You're right; it was not viewed as a right wing takeover. It was just a rich guy. And in fact, opinions were mixed. You could find some lefties saying like they were worried about the effect of a billionaire owning, yada, yada, yada. And maybe they were right to worry. Maybe they were correct in the end. But there were a lot of people who thought, oh, this is nice. Like Bezos is going to keep a prestigious newspaper alive and they won't have to worry about profit because he's just going to fund them and they can just keep being the Washington Post. Like, this is great.
right, and the idea, and this was very similar for Patrick Soon-Shiong, was that this was kind of a public service, that they were investing in the community and trying to ensure that they would continue to have good reporting. And they got a lot of praise for that, and it was, I think, genuine and I think justified to some extent. I mean, my wife worked at the Washington Post for 11 years before she took a buyout as things turned there over the last few months. But I think, at the time, you had to consider the alternative. Newspapers that were not being bought by billionaires were not somehow existing as standalone properties and doing great work without the shackles of oligarchic funding. What was happening was they were getting rolled up by private equity and hedge funds, and they were seeing their budgets slashed anyway. So, again, that gets back to the first point, which is the increased weakening of the economic environment, the business environment for these companies. And it can be disorienting. It can be difficult to tell whether these moves to the right that we see are the result of, the genuine views of the ownership, or whether they're just trying to avoid retaliatory regulation of some kind. But it is happening all the same. It's hard to tell what the underlying factor is for any particular decision, or even when things are simply the result of a pure business decision because that environment is so poor. But we've seen over the last 7 months or so, we've from Stephen Colbert's show's cancellation being announced to the huge blow up recently over Jimmy Kimmel's show, to various purchases of media companies, a shift toward the right from what had been considered the kind of top tier mainstream media outlets.
Yeah, and the television part is interesting because it introduces kind of the next wave of this. Like if you think of wave one being Bezos buys the Post. What's the guy's name who owns the LA Times? I should know.
Patrick Soon-Shiong.
Soon-Shah. Okay. That if that's wave one, with I don't know, maybe the existence of Fox News is wave zero. But wave two kind of looks like this increasing hold on potentially broadcast and social media. Like newspapers are so, last generation, so Gen X coded. But what we're seeing now is, and I think Larry Ellison is one of the big protagonists in this story. Larry Ellison, the billionaire founder of Oracle, one of the richest men in the world, I believe, like top 10-ish. I don't know exactly where he
I think
sits.
top two. I
Yeah,
think
maybe.
at this point he and Elon Musk are going back and forth.
Yeah, I don't know where he sits on any given day, or like where Carlos Slim in Mexico is, but um, Larry Ellison is in talks to buy all sorts of things. I've heard talks that his son, I believe, is in charge of the takeover at CBS, where they're trying to install Barry Weiss as the head of CBS News. And Barry Weiss, to be fair, is not like a dyed-in-the-wool MAGA Trumper type. She's not going to be blindly loyal to the Trump agenda, but she is a right-wing figure who gets most of her action comes from poking a stick at the left. And on top of that, Larry Ellison, I believe, is in talks to buy CNN, a bundle of properties that includes like CNN and HBO and some other things. So we could see both CBS News and CNN both owned by a very close Trump ally. And Larry Ellison is reportedly one of Donald Trump's favorites. And then also, Larry Ellison is in talks to take a controlling stake in TikTok. This is something that I think is just, at the time of recording, this has just happened in the last week. And so we're still kind of digesting what will the TikTok deal look like. But it seems like Larry Ellison will take a pretty big stake, and potentially some other Trump-friendly entities like may also be taking stakes as well. And so Larry Ellison really becomes a main character in this story in phase 2. And I think we have to get into what it means for, not just the old tired newspaper. Everybody knows newspapers were dying. I was in college in 2006, and we already knew that the journalism majors were stupid back in 2006 because you're entering a dying industry. That was already part of the thing, like in terms of newspapers. But
I want to stand up for them being idealistic, not necessarily stupid.
Idealistic. That's a much nicer way to say it. No, but I'm being facetious here a little bit. But yeah, the broadcast and social media spheres also being part of this. Like, I think we have to really dive into what that means.
Yeah, there's a lot of different parts here. So distinguishing your phase 0 here, your Fox News and the like from phase 1. So phase 0 is really the creation of alternatives to what was considered the sort of mainstream culture. The right made a calculated decision that rather than try to engage with media outlets, with universities, what they were going to do was stand up their own versions of those institutions. So that would be, Fox News in the world of cable news. It was magazines like National Review, the Weekly Standard, think tanks like the Heritage Foundation. The idea here was to create were basically parallel institutions that were much more explicitly partisan than the sort of existing mainstream ones. So the phase 1 here is about institutional capture. It is now, they have created these parallel institutions. Those institutions are at least as powerful as the mainstream ones. And so now what we're seeing is those mainstream institutions be sort of moved into the right's column, or at least that is, I think, what we're seeing them attempt to do. So, as you mentioned, so David Ellison, the son of Larry Ellison, was the head of Skydance Media. He then, over the last year, his company has purchased Paramount, which was the parent company of CBS News. There's reports that he's making a play for CNN's parent company as well, and that Larry Ellison, as head of Oracle, will play a major role in this U.S. spinoff of TikTok. So that's a lot of power invested under a single family of right-wing billionaires. Larry Ellison is someone who's very close to Donald Trump. And his son, David, is the rare media magnate to get the Donald Trump seal of approval. For years, Trump has railed against ABC and CBS and NBC. He said that they're fake news. He said that they give him too much negative coverage. And he said that the FCC should take away their licenses and take them off the air because of that. But more recently, the rhetoric has changed. He's continued to attack ABC and NBC, but CBS is off the bad list apparently. And recently, he gave in one of his many media statements praised David Ellison, said he's a great man who's going to do the right thing with CBS News. So he has an expectation, right?
That's such a Trumpian phrase. Like, he doesn't even bother to hide the mafia nature of how he kind of runs the state. And, I like David. I know he's going to do the right thing.
Yeah,
and gives the hard stare afterwards.
There's no subtlety or subtext about any of this. Other people on the right will, be a lot cagier about this sort of thing. But, Donald Trump is perfectly willing to say straight away what he's trying to do, which is make the media more palatable to him. And he thinks that this is the guy to do it.
Yeah, he had something that was in a press gaggle. He said something like, well, they have 97% negative stories. And when you're 97% negative, that's not free speech. And it's such a ridiculous thing to say.
Well, but by saying, I think Donald Trump recognizes, as we all do, that Republicans in Congress don't care. It's not like he's going to face some sort of revolt from anyone that matters over this. They've all kind of made their peace with the fact that he has this sort of authoritarian character, that he doesn't have any particular support for basic American freedoms, the First Amendment, anything like that. He doesn't care, and they don't care that he doesn't care. And so, yeah, he thinks that David Ellison is going to make CBS more palatable to him personally. David Ellison is apparently buying Bari Weiss's free press outlet and is going to put her in a position as editor-in-chief of CBS News. We don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but it sounds like someone who has never worked as a reporter, who's been an opinion journalist her entire career, who has no television experience really to speak of, is going to be in charge of that outlet because she has the ideological character that David Ellison and Donald Trump want from the person who is the head of CBS News.
Yeah, and I feel mildly conflicted about that because in a sense, Bari Weiss is not the worst person in the world you could choose for this. They could very easily just put Tucker Carlson in charge of it and say, suck it, libs. And there are much worse individuals out there that would just go full MAGA, full, adherence and loyalty and whatever. And I don't think that Bari Weiss is that.
I agree to a point. What I would say, though, is that if Tucker Carlson took over CBS News, the audience would crater overnight. The whole thing would collapse. Bari Weiss's political project is creating a sort of permission structure for people on the center left, in the center, on the center right, to support people who are illiberal right-wing politicians. That makes her, I think, a much more cunning operator in a position like that, someone who's more likely to actually have some sort of impact on the public discourse than someone like Carlson, who I think would just kind of collapse the outlet altogether.
She has a sort of discipline, I guess, about what she does in her political project, which I don't disagree with you, but I would describe it slightly differently. I would say that if you go look at the Free Press, there's on any given week, 3 articles about trans people and 0 about healthcare. And if you look at the last year, there's probably 100 articles about trans people and maybe 2 about healthcare.
So what she does, right. So what she's doing is she finds the issues that split liberals from the left and she hones in on them and hammers them over and over again. And I think it's because those are the issues that she is legitimately interested in. I've never gotten the sense from her writing on her own that she was like deeply invested in economic policy or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't mind that Barry Weiss exists as an opinion columnist. If an opinion columnist wants to hone in on a particular set of issues like trans stuff or wokeness or whatever, that's fine. But I think when it becomes the project of something as big as the Free Press and it's the entire site's editorial policy to do that, then it becomes, more nakedly partisan in the sense that we're just not going to talk about how Republicans took healthcare away from 15 million people or whatever. We'd rather focus on an elementary school teacher who showed a book about gay people, or whatever the case may be.
And frankly, that's not terribly different from a lot of what you see on Fox News. They are similarly much more focused on these sort of woke cultural issues than they are on economic policy or anything like that.
So there's something that we've mentioned, but we haven't really dived into yet. We've talked kind of at length about the actual purchase of media properties, whether it's the LA Times, the Washington Post, CNN, CBS News, all of these different things, TikTok. The other thing, and we should mention, I will get to Elon Musk and Twitter later, but the other thing we should mention is that there's a series of decisions, and we kind of have mentioned this, that, ABC and Disney are not owned by anybody sympathetic to the Trump family or to the MAGA style of politics. Same goes for NBC. Same goes, for instance, for YouTube. But there's another thing that's happening where if they don't own these properties outright, they are trying to bully them into submission. Just this week, YouTube, I think, paid out like $25 million to settle a lawsuit Donald Trump had against them. And this was basically just recognition, I think. This was just calculus of, we're probably correct on the merits, but it's not worth pissing off the guy who's going to be president for another 3.5 years. ABC has paid up to Donald Trump and had this, thing where they fired Jimmy Kimmel after pressure from the conservative movement, after some jawboning from Brendan Carr, who's the head of the FCC. And you see this kind of thing happening more and more and more. And, it even gets into another thing we haven't even talked about is that affiliate networks, Sinclair and Nexstar, which own all the local TV stations across the country, and they're conservative lean. But I think we also have to kind of dive into what's going on with the kind of, if they don't own it, they will try to own it through pressure campaigns, that whole dynamic.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Donald Trump has a very strong understanding of how the media industry functions, and how the news portion of it kind of fits into the broader picture. When he criticizes ABC, he typically criticizes them as sort of Disney ABC. When he criticizes the Washington Post, it's the Amazon Washington Post. He understands that the news outlets are tiny subdivisions of massive multinational conglomerates that have substantial business interests before the federal government at any particular time. And he is willing to leverage those weaknesses to try to cudgel the media into line. He did this a bunch in the first term as well, but with less success. For instance, his Justice Department put up a big antitrust fight over a merger involving CNN's parent company. It was pretty obvious to everyone that this was happening strictly because Donald Trump didn't like CNN's political coverage. The difference, though, was that the parent company fought it in court. They decided that rather than try to bend to Donald Trump's will, they were going to avail themselves of their rights under the law. And I think that's the major difference that we've seen from the first term to the second term. And in the second term, the media magnates who control these news outlets have been capitulating at a much higher rate. They are giving up on lawsuits that they could easily win, defamation lawsuits that Donald Trump has filed against them personally. And they are giving in to regulatory pressure very quickly, rather than try to fight it out through the process, even when, as with Brendan Carr's jawboning around Jimmy Kimmel, that seems almost certainly a violation of the First Amendment that the Supreme Court would toss if there was any actual damages involved incredibly quickly.
And just in case any listeners don't know what jawboning is, we've both said this. It's kind of when it's the mob boss tactic of someone in government going and saying, "Hey, I think you should take that guy off the air. It'd be a shame if you didn't. There's a lot of breakable stuff around here. Something might happen to it. In the same, a mob boss demanding protection from a shop owner, protection money. That is jawboning, is government officials pressuring you either on the record or off the record. And I said this to Sarah. It's the most humiliating thing about it is that he's not like Brendan Carr didn't even bother to hide this. He didn't go through back channels to ABC. Like, he tweeted this out. He said it on a podcast. Like, he's being very public with his threats.
He said, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," which sounds like something that you'd see on The Sopranos. But
can you say that with an Italian accent, Matt?
My mother would be very angry at me if I disgraced
Is
my
that a
people
racial hate crime?
in that way. It would be very unfortunate. On the one hand, it's good that it happened in public because we all could tell what was happening in real time. Like, if he had called up Nexstar or Sinclair, these massive affiliate networks that own each nearly 200 local broadcast stations across the country, if he had called them up and said, "Hey, you should take Jimmy Kimmel off the air, and maybe we won't have to do some regulatory action against you," we might not have known this was happening at all. But he did it in public. He went on Benny Johnson's podcast. Benny Johnson, who you may remember received millions of dollars from the Russian government unwittingly through a cutout. It was, this is not exactly someone who has a spotless resume of journalistic propriety. But that's who Brendan Carr picked to go on his show and to threaten Disney and to threaten the affiliate networks and to say that if there wasn't some action taken on Jimmy Kimmel, the FCC might have some work to do. And everyone sort of listened to that as it was intended. And so Nexstar and Sinclair both said that they were not going to air Kimmel's show. And then right after that, Disney said that he was suspended indefinitely. So it was effective, at least in the short term. But the good news, I think, is that Americans do still like free speech. They do not like the federal government trying to keep people from stating their minds in public. And so there was a huge backlash from Democrats and even some Republicans. There was a lot of pressure put on Disney by its subscribers. You had nearly 2 million Disney Plus subscriptions canceled in the wake of this. And as a result, Kimmel was back on the air within a week. So it's, on the one hand, it's unnerving that this happened. But the good news is it can't succeed for too long yet, at least.
Do you think this is the same thing that's happening with the shift among people like Jeff Bezos, who, in the wake of Donald Trump's second election, says, "Oh, well, now the Washington Post is going to become a place for free markets," which, number one, not that Donald Trump gives a shit about free markets, but it's at least signaling in the conservative direction. And then you could also point to Mark Zuckerberg doing kind of a little tour around, Joe Rogan's podcast and different things. And, Donald Trump gets elected and all of a sudden Mark Zuckerberg is blowing where the wind goes, right? He's, flying in whatever direction is just easiest for him. And Facebook is obviously one of the most important media companies in the world. Do you think that that's basically the same thing, except Zuckerberg was just getting out ahead of this?
So this is, as I said earlier, why it can be somewhat disorienting and hard to tell what exactly is happening with some of these decisions. I don't know. I mean, frankly, billionaires are weird. No billionaire is going to let me run their broadcast network after I said that. But these are people of phenomenal wealth and influence who have their own personal views, and trying to disaggregate whether their views have changed or whether they are reacting to, direct or sort of unstated pressure in some way is hard to tell. I mean, in Trump's first term, he had some real trouble with federal regulators, with Amazon. There was a big push to try to get by Donald Trump to try to get Amazon to need to pay more for shipping from the U.S. Postal Service. There was a contract that Amazon Web Services lost with the Pentagon. I believe it was like a $10 billion contract, which seemed to have been influenced by Donald Trump's hatred for the Amazon Washington Post. He was willing to fight in the first term. He's not willing to fight in the second term. Is that because he's come around to Donald Trump's way of thinking? Is that because he thinks that his companies are more vulnerable this time around? I don't really know. And I don't think anyone else does either. It's just, it's tough to parse out. But what I think the sort of effect is quite clear. I mean, you've seen at the Washington Post, I think the news side is still quite good and doing some really great reporting. But the opinion side, there's been a sort of dictate laid down from the top that they're going to move in a different direction. Basically, all of the columnists who weren't explicitly on the right have either taken buyouts or been pushed out in some way. And that's sort of an ongoing process. You saw some new hires, 3 conservative columnists brought on in the past week. And so, that is a significant ideological shift that's underway in that paper's opinion section. Whether it's
I was impacted by that. It was a tragedy. This is some inside baseball for listeners, but I'm going to make this about myself, as every good podcaster does, right? Every podcaster has an ego the size of a continent, guys. If you haven't realized that, then it's because I did a good job hiding it. But I was, I'd been writing for a little while. I've been writing about politics for a few years. And I finally got this email out of the blue from an assistant editor at the Washington Post opinion page. It was like, hey, I've been reading some of your stuff. Like, this is good stuff. Like, you should submit some things to us. And I was thinking, I did it. It's finally coming in, boys. I'm going to be in the pages of the Washington Post. And there was a big moment for me. And then, so I was like, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till I have a really good pitch. 2 weeks later, I emailed him. He had taken a buyout. He was gone from the Washington Post. So the real tragedy of all this is that I don't get to be in the Washington Post. So, we're keeping our priorities where they should be.
But I think that speaks to a sort of institutional move by that paper that's going to ensure that a lot more of the funds that they have for outside op-eds are going to people towards the right rather than towards the left. That's a meaningful impact to the livelihoods of writers on the left who might rely on that in some way, and of course the livelihoods of the editors themselves who find themselves pushed out and replaced by people who are on the right. So this is the sort of the institutional capture underway in a similar way that you'd see in the Justice Department, right, where you get rid of people who think that January 6th was bad, and you replace them with people who think that January 6th wasn't so bad. And the result will influence, what the priorities are for prosecutions going forward.
I think all of this it's important to kind of note these dynamics. The one other big thing that we haven't touched on yet is Elon Musk. And obviously Musk is part of this entire pattern of conservative or Trump-aligned billionaires buying up media properties. Twitter is obviously a very, very large media property. It's weird to talk about sometimes like Twitter and Facebook being media properties when we've been talking about very historically important kind of things like the Washington Post or CNN. But they really are where people read news now. They're where public opinion is set. Sometimes, we talk about like Twitter is the assignment desk for journalists all across the country. Like, what are we writing about today? I don't know. Go check Twitter. But Elon Musk buying Twitter has obviously made an enormous difference to that site's cultural pull. It is now far more conservative than it used to be. A lot of progressive people left for Threads or Blue Sky or whatever, and I don't think Blue Sky is ever really going to be a challenge, but it's kind of a bunch of political voices that subtracted themselves out of the national conversation in a sense. They're now in their own little bubble. They've self-quarantined into Blue Sky, and it's part of this pattern where Facebook and TikTok and Twitter are probably the three most important social media sites, maybe YouTube as well, but they're also at this point bribing Donald Trump not to do what they not to go after them. And it's just it paints a grim picture that in the newspaper industry, in the television industry, in the social media industry, that all of these see increasing levels of both outright control by conservatives and conservative aligned people, and informal control through the use of pressure and the use of the kind of mafia style threats. What does this do? The entire picture here to American media? Like, are we just screwed? Is the idea of the free press just going to become less and less important? Do you think that this will actually like lessen people's ability to get accurate information? I guess the question here, I'm kind of stumbling over this, but how bad do you think this is in a practical sense, and what practical impacts might it have?
Well, I'm reminded of the senator from Alaska who once described the internet as a series of tubes. Social media, to a large extent, really is the system of tubes through which people get a lot of their news these days. You have both individuals who are kind of ensconced in their social feeds and just kind of let it wash over them. You have people looking for guidance from various influencers that they trust in one way or another. You have sort of media outlets that have become, in some ways, kind of parasitic on particular social media platforms and sort of using them as a way to get their work out there. So I think the shifts that we're seeing here can be quite significant, especially since so much of what you get on social media is algorithmic in nature, which means, you do not have direct control necessarily of the information that is being fed to you. You don't necessarily know why you're getting the information that you get. So, you could imagine that the purchase of TikTok by its U.S. operations by this sort of coalition of right-wing Trumpy billionaires could lead to the thumb being put on the scale of that algorithm, and a sort of favoring of right-wing content over left-wing content to a greater extent than we already see, and thus people getting more of that content and being convinced to buy it and it having a major political impact. You could also see, though, a scenario where people push back on that they don't like the changes in the algorithm. They don't approve of the messages that they're getting, and they try to find a competitor of some sort that they like better. Obviously, these major platforms like TikTok and Instagram, have a lot of first mover advantage. They have huge audiences already. But I think we have seen over the years shifts in which of those platforms people gravitate to. You see sort of generational splits. You see a kind of fading away of the impact that I think Facebook once had on the discourse. It's sort of it disappeared almost entirely. TikTok has dramatically increased over the last few years. You could imagine other platforms kind of moving in to that territory. You could also eh, consider the possibility that, especially with the rise of AI and the degree of slop that is kind of getting poured into all of these platforms, that Americans might start turning away from social media altogether. Maybe we move back to more of a focus on particular websites, homepages as the outlet of choice. Maybe Substack becomes more prominent in one way or another. There are a lot of different ways this can go. Certainly, I think it's not a good sign that these outlets are being either purchased or sort of suborned in one way or another by the right. But it's not necessarily, a total disaster.
Yeah, I kind of come in the same place. I am worried about all this, to be clear, but I don't think it's going to be wildly successful. Like the fact that Mark Zuckerberg owns Instagram and is making a right-wing shift in his personal politics. Instagram is still filled with resist lib, wine mom nonsense and infographics about the genocide in Palestine. And, there's still a lot of conversation happening on TikTok and Twitter that is not in the direction its owners may want. Like, I don't think I don't think it matters, but I don't think it's a death blow. And so we'll have to see,
One of the problems I always have in these discussions is that I think social media is really bad. Like, I think it's a terrible way to get information about the world around you through like algorithmically enhanced
Of course it is.
video
Yeah.
clips or tiny fractional blog posts or whatever it is. Like, this is just it's not like the current system is an amazing way to like become an informed member of society.
This is why I host an hour-long podcast and then I write on Substack, because we're fighting the good fight, you and me, Matt. Even though we both tweet a lot too, like, let's be honest. But
I mean, we all must have some vices, but frankly, like I'm not on TikTok because I think I would like it too much. I think that it would be too addictive for me, and I have like other things that I would prefer to do with my time, and so I do those things instead. But these are still huge platforms with massive audiences that a lot of people are relying on to get information. They shouldn't do that. But they do anyway. So you have to some extent, someone has to be engaging with them, even if it can't be me.
this is the world we live in. But I'll ask my traditional final question. Where can people go to learn more? I am happy to recommend you and your writing and Media Matters for America. Matt writes a lot of good stuff, as do his colleagues at Media Matters, about the nature of the modern media, and especially about the right-wing media and what's going on in that sphere. Matt has watched more hours of Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and Ben Shapiro than anyone alive should ever have to watch. We thank him for his service. You should check out his work. But other than yourself, Matt, what would you recommend for people who want to follow the developments here, the things that happen? What do you use to keep informed?
Well, honestly, I would tell them they should subscribe to your Substack. I think you're doing great work on a lot of this,
Yes.
a lot of the social
Yes.
media and section of the story that I am less well versed in. I think they need to be paying attention to what you have to say.
Subscribe to Infinite Scroll, everyone. You heard it. I did not pay Matt to say that at all. No, he did it for free, which is great.
Did you hear that, Brendan Carr? I did it for free.
All right. Well, we will close the show. I want to say thank you one more time to my guest, Matt Gertz. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.